Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Keep Middlesex Moving's Mobility Matters podcast. I am Arlene Holt, and I am joined today with Brian Tobin, KMM's Executive Director. Hey, Brian.
Hello, Arlene.
And we are also joined by Jack Dean of New Jersey Transit. Hi, Jack.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Why don't we start off today talking about the Avatar project that New Jersey Transit sponsored a couple years back. So why don't you start telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at New Jersey Transit?
Oh, okay. Well, thanks. Yeah, happy to talk up our experiment in automated vehicles from a recent past. So my name is Jack Dean. I'm the Senior Program Director of Research and Community Services here at New Jersey Transit, which is part of the planning program. And broadly, the planning department's role is to advise senior management, give them good insights, good advice, pertinent and timely analysis, so that they can make good business decisions. I've been at New Jersey Transit for about 7 years. Before that, I was at the MTA in New York City for a little more than 20 years. And before that, at Regional Plan Association. I earned my Master's of City and Regional Planning at Rutgers University a while ago. I'm afraid to even say that before there was a Blaustein school, but it prepared me well for an exciting career in planning.
It sounds like you have your hands full over at New Jersey Transit. There's a lot of exciting things happening in the last several years. And one of them was the Avatar project. So can you tell us a little bit about what Avatar is or what it was, and a little bit about what inspired New Jersey Transit to explore autonomous vehicle technology?
Sure. So Avatar is kind of a nickname, and I have to remember precisely what it stood for, but our colleagues in the marketing department helped put it together. It was very catchy. It was our automated vehicle assessment, testing, and research pilot. So that's what Avatar stood for. What we wanted to really understand was whether automated vehicles, which have been proving themselves to be more and more useful over the last 10 years, could they help address what we call the first mile, last mile problem in public transportation? That is, how do we connect people in that last mile from, say, a rail or bus station or some community resource and their home? There are lots of ways you can do that. You can certainly drive yourself, which is probably least desirable from an environmental perspective. You can walk, you can take a bike, you could take a shuttle vehicle. And we were wondering if an automated shuttle vehicle might be a way to help people make those connections across that last mile. In particular, we wanted to know whether a vehicle like this could be useful in the community transit area that I work in of New Jersey Transit, where we help towns, counties, and nonprofits around the state develop and maintain shuttle services for seniors, people with disabilities, job seekers, essentially people who are unable to drive, who might live in places where traditional bus and train service doesn't exist. So we're kind of the capillaries, if you will, of the public transportation system. And so again, the thought was whether these type of self-driving shuttle vehicles could be a useful supplement to the fleets and services offered by our community transportation partners.
I was one of the lucky people to ride in Avatar when it was being tested in Monmouth County.
Mm-hmm.
And I was blown away a lot. Oftentimes we think about autonomous vehicles. It has a really bad rap right now, but I was blown away by how simple but effective the technology was. Can you talk a little bit about the technology that's behind Avatar and what kind of systems were involved in the project?
Sure. We wanted to understand if these vehicles that are about the size of a minivan, and they can carry 8 to 10 people. So not a large vehicle, not a big bus or a big vehicle by any stretch. We wanted to understand if that type of vehicle, which is also electric powered, so it's clean and quiet, how effective would they be? And also how good was their performance? So we looked around for vehicles that could fit that mission, if you will, and we found a Navia vehicle. Navia is a French company, and they were the ones who built the vehicles that you tested with us. So, as I say, they're about the size of a van. They have 4 rubber tires and all glassed in. There is no steering wheel. There's no brake pedals. There's no side view mirrors. So a computer that's fed lots of information about the environment through sensors, and we can talk about the sensors in detail in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
That type of vehicle was what we tested. And so we acquired 2 of them, and we tested them at the former Marlborough Airport in Monmouth County. But the framework for it was really useful. We worked with the Rutgers University Center for Advanced Infrastructure and Transportation, which is sometimes known as CATE. They're part of the School of Engineering.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah,
Well, it
yeah.
sounds very familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, might ring a bell for Brian.
Yeah.
And so that's how we got to work with Brian and his colleagues to figure out what was a safe and productive way to test the vehicle, to put it through its paces in a safe space. So not on a public road where if it became a nuisance, wouldn't be tying up traffic. Working with the Kate staff and a subcontractor, Infratech, that was based in Princeton Junction. They acquired the two vehicles and helped us set up the testing site at the former Marlborough Airport.
Could you talk a little bit more about how the actual testing went? Did you use human operators? What were you allowed to do under the guidelines from, I guess, the federal government and or the state government?
So we first started off, because we unfortunately started off almost right at the beginning of the pandemic. Where we really weren't able to do too much on the ground for safety reasons. People were working from home. So we did a lot of documentary work first, preparing a safety plan based on best practices of other AV testing. We used resources from the federal NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and from other cities and state agencies that had tested automated vehicles just prior to the pandemic. So, for instance, we created a safety plan, identified a safety manager, and what the procedures would be for our proposed test site. So we really wanted to, trite but true, that safety comes first. We weren't really familiar with these vehicles. We didn't have a lot of personal expertise. So we wanted to learn from the best. And so we made a good use of the pandemic shutdown time to do that. So we then identified, after looking at a couple of sites, the Marlborough Airport site. That was very consistent with our sort of safety vision, that the former runways and taxiways were not part of the public roads. And it was an area that we could fence off. So in case there was a problem with the vehicle, no one would be exposed to any hazards. These vehicles generally had a good reputation, but they had a reputation for being sometimes a little touchy and bulky, I guess is a way to describe it. So we wouldn't want it to be on a public road and cause a traffic jam, for instance. But in particular, we also wanted to know, again, how the vehicle worked in detail. And then once we were confident that the vehicle was working properly, as per the manufacturer's specifications, and that it was working within our safety framework, that we could start to invite in our community transportation partners. That's how friends from Middlesex, for instance, and other counties were able to come see the vehicle. But it was still in this enclosed space that we were fortunate to create.
One of the best parts about participating in this research project with you, for those listeners who may not have listened to my introductory podcast, I used to work at Kate, so I got to work on lots of these great research projects. I came from a research project that was working in conjunction with this one about finding out how populations with disabilities, both developmental and physical, would interact with types of vehicles like this and helping to address their first and last mile. How do you think that the research project showed access to it, and how did the vehicles have to be modified for those types of populations?
It's a great question. And I'll just sort of back up a little bit and say one of the earliest inspirations for this project was actually based on something Cecilia Feely did that we got to observe in 2018, 2019, I think it was. She and Andrea Lubin were working on a project looking at automated vehicles, particularly for clients who might have cognitive disabilities. Would this be a way for them to be able to get around with a level of personal autonomy that they hadn't had before? And she was able to arrange for a different but similar shuttle vehicle to be shown at Princeton University at their Smart Driving Car Summit, which I think was in 2019.
It was.
Yeah.
I guess it was the Ollie vehicle, and it went,
Yes, thank you.
it went around the football field. I was there for all that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so seeing that was really one of the sparks, to be honest. That was one of the places where we wanted to pick up the ball, if you will, to see were there more things possible that these vehicles could accomplish. So we were fortunate to pick Cecilia's brain, and she was part of our project team before her untimely passing. So that really was kind of one of the sparks for this, was could vehicles of this nature help people have more personal autonomy? And so to go back to your question, because disabilities can take many forms, visible and invisible, the vehicle needs to be as accommodating as possible. For these vehicles, we certainly knew that it needed to have a ramp so that someone with a mobility disability could get into the vehicle without struggling with a step-up height. So we ordered, of our two vehicles, one had a power ramp that could be deployed. But even there, it was very useful to have visitors come and inspect the vehicle who did have a mobility disability, and they gave our team some really useful feedback that hopefully could be used in the future as these vehicles come into the forefront. But some of the other features that would need to be considered would be for other forms of challenges, visual challenge of how to identify that the vehicle is here, how to find the buttons, for instance, if you have low vision, audio cues or visual cues for people who have other challenges. For a vehicle like this to be used in the service of people with disabilities, seniors, and others, it has to be as accommodating and friendly as possible. And that was one of the things we really wanted to test with your team, Brian, and colleagues at NJIT. That's one of the research pieces as well, is how that population would experience and use an automated vehicle.
I want to quickly just go back for people who heard some names. Cecilia Feely was the chief researcher at Kate for a project called the Autism Transportation Project. And a lot of the work that she did was also through a commission established under Governor Christie about helping identify transportation gaps and needs for those with disabilities. It primarily focused on individuals with autism that were on the spectrum, but it really was open and it identified a lot of needs for people with transportation issues. And the other person I think you mentioned was Andrea Lubin, who at the time and now currently works at the Rutgers Voorhees School for the New Jersey TIP program and in the Blaustein School. So these are research projects that are done conjunctively with a lot of different institutions at Rutgers. And also we worked with Bronislav Dmitriev at NJIT as well on that project. And also, I mean, I just named the people on that one side, but working with all of your partners and with Jack. And it was cool to have these two projects going on at the same time because they were able to offer lots of insight to each other.
Yes, indeed.
So when we consider what's Avatar for transit use, what would you like to see the future of transportation in Middlesex County and for New Jersey Transit using autonomous vehicles like Avatar?
This type of vehicle probably would not be useful to New Jersey Transit itself. Our vehicles are larger. We need to carry more people than these vehicles would provide. These vehicles we were hoping would be interesting to the community transportation providers. So there are county level shuttle services. There are also town level shuttles that are traditional vehicles. They're usually minibuses that are built on the frame of a van. So they have the nose of a van and the body of a small bus. And they're driven by a staff person who's highly trained. And that's terrific. They provide a very valuable service in those communities. Notionally, our question was, could a vehicle like this be a supplement to those fleets of services that are already provided? Perhaps that they could take the base load, if you will, predictable paths that went back and forth, say from a senior housing development to the library, to the store, to the post office, and it could just keep moving around the community, essentially like a horizontal elevator, and then potentially free up staff resources for the driven vehicles for customers who needed an additional service. Maybe they're making a trip further away or some other combination of service characteristics. So you could sort of have, again, the automated horizontal elevator making connections around the community, and then the staffed vehicles for other types of assignments. There is a future opportunity for vehicles like this. Of course, it's something that the community transit managers would have to decide that they wanted to take the next step. I think in fairness, what we did learn with this particular vehicle, and it's not to really pick on the vehicle, is that it represents a technological snapshot in time. It represents automated vehicle technology of year 2020, which wasn't bad. The vehicle could do most of the things that we asked it to do, but it drives slowly, for instance. It drives at maybe 12 to 15 miles per hour. We definitely got the impression that that was just too slow. Although it was very safe in what it was doing, that was its real maximum capacity. That was also what it was limited to by NHTSA. So in order to use a vehicle like this, you need a permit or a waiver from federal regulations. At that point, NHTSA was also capping the speeds of these vehicles to about 12 miles per hour for safety purposes. Again, that's fine. In mixed traffic, this would be probably problematic, leading to people driving slowly behind it here in New Jersey, honking their horns at it, giving it a one-finger salute as they passed it. It probably just wasn't a good mix for this vehicle technology.
Right.
It also seemed to be a little bit sensitive to bad weather. Here in New Jersey, we don't have crazy weather, but we can get all four seasons in one day. In heavy rain, the vehicle would have difficulty sensing the environment around it. Same if there was a relatively heavy snow. Obviously, none of us would want to be out in a heavy snow. Snowflakes, for instance, this was a little idiosyncrasy. Snowflakes of kind of a certain size would fall in front of the sensors in the front of the vehicle, and the LiDAR systems that the sensors use, basically invisible lidar or laser beams, they're shot out into the environment. And as they reflect and come back to the sensor, the computer draws a picture of what's around it. So the laser beams that are supposed to be reflected off of, say, a telephone pole or a tree or some other object would also reflect off the snowflake and come back to the sensor. The sensor would read that as, oh my goodness, there's something right in front of me, slam on the brakes. It would be a false alarm because obviously snow is not an impediment. But because it had that level of caution built into it, the vehicle could be bulky in weather that you probably could drive in yourself, but the vehicle didn't want to go. So there were certain things where this particular vehicle, again, sort of represents a snapshot of AV technology of about 2020. And technology moves on. So there are other vehicles that are coming out. They're being tested and deployed in other areas of the country, for instance, that are more capable. I'll just say a little bit more that you do see that a lot of the self-driving vehicles are being tested in areas that have terrific weather. Right? Phoenix, Arizona, or to some degree, the Bay Area in San Francisco or Austin, Texas, places like that. Those are areas where the environmental conditions are probably a lot more favorable to a self-driving car. So you don't have the heavy rain, you don't have the heavy snow getting in the way. But we do understand that there are some vehicles being tested in northern areas, like in Minnesota, where they are finding ways to adapt to, using air quotes, seeing in the snow that they can still successfully drive.
Do you know that the Port Authority has something going on at, I think, JFK right now, too? So I find that interesting, driving around parking lots, picking up passengers. They don't have to run the buses as much because there's many more of the vans driving around. But that kind of leads us to our next question. We've been talking a lot about small buses, but how about autonomous vehicles in general? Where do you think those and the kinds of passenger buses that you're talking about and have tested, where do you think they're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years?
It's a great question. I don't know too much about passenger cars. I've taken a drive in a late model Tesla that has the so-called full self-driving features in it. And it drove from Princeton to Trenton pretty successfully, which was very impressive to see it drive. But coming back to public transportation, it seems like we're in a little bit of a lull right now in the industry where there was the flurry of vehicles that came out around 2020, like the Navia vehicle, like the Ollie vehicle, where they were really kind of breaking new ground, but they didn't really scale. They didn't really get to a point of broad customer acceptance. But there seems to be a new generation coming out. For instance, Holon, which is a German company, will be building a new model, a new generation of AV shuttle that will be tested in Jacksonville. The Jacksonville Transit Authority is doing a lot of really interesting things in automated vehicles as part of their plans to replace the older generation SkyTrain vehicles. So that Holon vehicle could be really interesting. The vehicle that you pointed out a moment ago being tested by the Port Authority at JFK, maybe have better technological chops than the earlier generation and be more dependable. I think that was sort of the bottom line, is that our community transit colleagues who came to visit the vehicle were concerned about reliability. The joke in public transportation is you're as good as your last rush hour. And so if you have a fussy vehicle that either doesn't want to go, or mid-route it shuts down and you have to now rescue those passengers, so to speak, by driving out a traditional vehicle to pick them up and take them to their final destinations. The public transit managers, like everybody else, doesn't want to be wiping egg off their face in the afternoon because the vehicle didn't work. So I have high hopes, I'll put it that way. I have high hopes that the progress of the technology will lead to more interest and adoption. I could certainly see it in other areas of New Jersey, conceivably. There are lots of, for instance, active adult communities in central and southern New Jersey. Some of the residents might prefer not to drive. And so vehicles like this could bring people from their home to the clubhouse, could bring them to a central bus hub adjacent to their community where they could get a traditional bus or train and continue their journey. Picture them certainly on college campuses, especially ones that have a lot of commuters, picking up the students in the parking lots and bringing them into the center of campus. Nobody really wants to have a campus that's just full of parking lots. You want to have that nice academic experience, right? Like the old Queens campus at Rutgers, right? You want to have that lovely experience. You don't want to be surrounded by a sea of parking. And so potentially vehicles like this could be helpful. Another location could be down the shore, right? Where You don't want to have the boardwalk areas also a sea of parking, but you need something that can bring people back and forth from a remote parking lot to the boardwalk so they can enjoy their day, but again, not get frustrated with parking and all that. I think there are places for vehicles like this, but I think the managers of these locations will need to see more progress on the technological side, that the vehicles are very reliable as their staffed vehicles. So it's probably going to be their yardstick, I would imagine.
Yeah, we noticed a lot of in our part of the research project, we noticed that there was a lot of skepticism among the community transit people. I guess in New Jersey, we're really looking forward to whomever takes that first chance, right? So
Mhm.
if the Port Authority moves their vans to Newark and people can start to see it getting used and the skepticism goes down,
Yeah.
maybe that'll help out. But we also are seeing that Middlesex is kind of an interesting county because we have New Brunswick and we have them downtowns like Metuchen and Rahway that are all on the train line. And then we
Mhm.
have Monroe and Jamesburg, which are all kind of those communities that you were addressing. And their first and last miles are 200 feet. They can't necessarily make it to their clubhouse or quarter mile. And there's nowhere to drive to them. So these shuttles may or may not be beneficial in their areas. So
Mhm.
I think from us at Keep Middlesex Moving, we're looking forward to the future of these vehicles and eventually seeing where they end up.
No, that certainly makes a lot of sense. And that was one of the goals really of our project, is to just simply make these vehicles more tangible to the community managers here in New Jersey. Before we brought these vehicles over and invited folks to come see them at the airport, these were really just an abstraction, right? You might see a YouTube video of someone trying something with a vehicle like this, but in California, or you might see it in a trade magazine describing something in France. You know,
Right. Yeah.
um, but in the Northeast, we'd never experienced these vehicles in person. What do they look like? What do they sound like? How do they feel? How reliable are they? What made it stop? What makes it go? So I think that was one of the services we provided at the end of the day, was just to make this type of technology a bit more concrete to the community managers to see if it was something that they could imagine using in the future, if they could live up to the expectations of the community transit managers as well.
I have to say, I think that's one of the major successes of this pilot was this testing site was for people like myself and the other TMA partners and people within county government to actually see and experience autonomous vehicles, even though it was in a testing site, but to be able to experience them and imagine them in real world experiences.
Mhm.
So prior to entering into an autonomous vehicle, I had a lot of negative perceptions of what that would be like just from watching like the YouTube videos and things of the Waymo vehicles kind of going in circles. That's not to say that autonomous vehicles don't have their problems, but you can imagine a future where these autonomous vehicles will be able to solve the first mile and last mile problem. Even though the quirks haven't been fully hashed out, we can imagine what they will look like in the future when they are working better, and especially in New Jersey area where we are so heavily congested and there's
Mhm.
a lot of people and everybody's trying to get around. I think it was a really great learning lesson for myself and for everybody that participated in it, because we can see the future that is now. It's happening now.
Well, thank you for saying that. That's why we appreciated everyone's visit. We gave folks a sort of before and after survey who came to visit us to understand, I don't say where their head's at, that's a little bit too conditional, but what was your
Yeah.
prior experience? What are your expectations? What are your concerns? First coming to the site, and then as sort of little exit interview, how have your thoughts changed during the course of the visit? And many people had the experience that you did. If they had heard about automated vehicles, sometimes they'd heard just negative things. People who had a Tesla and were screwing around with it, basically being unsafe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Watching a video on their phone while they thought the car was driving itself, and then the car got into trouble and the driver wasn't ready to take control again, and bad things happened. So there were definitely people doing bad things, posting it on social media, which didn't help at all. So here we were sort of grateful that for people who rode in our shuttle, usually after the first lap around the airport, they would then start to get fidgety, or they'd look at their phone, or they'd be looking all around because they had sort of accepted in their mind that, okay, the vehicle does what it's supposed to do. And so now I can kind of relax. And it becomes sort of like, to use the elevator metaphor, the horizontal elevator. When you're in an elevator, you push the button and you're waiting, but sometimes you then start looking at your watch, or you're fixing your tie, or whatever you're doing, because you trust that the elevator knows what to do and it's going to get you to the right floor. very grateful for the visits of folks like yourself who helped give us important feedback too.
What are some key lessons that you've learned throughout your time with this project that you would like to share with cities and municipalities interested in adopting autonomous vehicles within their municipalities to bridge that gap between first mile and last mile services?
I think it's to encourage folks to keep an open mind that vehicles like this, with a bit more technological advancement, could be a real useful addition to their current fleet and services. I don't really think that people need to kind of turn the world upside down to accommodate vehicles like this, but that they might see it again as a useful supplement. So that, again, the one model is that the automated self-driving vehicle can accommodate the simple sort of base load of travel in a municipality or in a development we talked about earlier, like the active adult developments or other places. So it could be a supplement. We always have to be sure that these vehicles are operating as safely as possible. We thought that these vehicles operated very well. They probably operated a bit too cautiously, and that's okay. That's understandable. But safety does have to come first. And I think part of what would be required for a community of some form or another to adopt a vehicle like this is it would require an educational program to the residents and to the potential customers, because these vehicles do operate differently than a staffed motor vehicle. We as humans tend to work a lot on unstated communications, that we rely on gestures, we rely on eye contact, sometimes in crossing the street. Like if I'm about to cross through a crosswalk and you're driving up, we might just make eye contact, little head nod, and we know kind of what each other is going to do. But a vehicle like this doesn't have that capability, doesn't have that facility to do nonverbal communication. So it would require the area where these would be next deployed to have a decent educational program so that everyone, including vulnerable road users, sort of know how these vehicles work. I think there's room for vehicles like this with a little bit more technological polish that I think will probably be coming in the vehicles that are about to be deployed over the next couple of years. I think there's a lot more advancement in the technology and in the reliability of these vehicles that will make them potentially more appealing to towns and counties.
Yeah, I agree. And, as we said, I think it'll come a lot with those first few people that make those choices and take those chances.
Yeah.
But Arlene and I, when we were talking about this, when I started this job, one of our bonding experiences was talking about this NJ Avatar. I think we're both very curious about one of the things that you referenced in your last answer was about sometimes that they were sensitive and they were responsive. And the way that you all showed us that was to roll out an inflate, and also maintaining safety was to roll out an inflatable deer. Arlene and I clearly bonded over it. I was going to surprise you with a photo of it here today.
Yeah.
Where's the deer? And is it okay?
That's funny.
We're both like you did not hit it so many times, and now we want to know and make sure that it's at least safe and in like living a very happy life.
Exactly. No, thanks for mentioning that. So some of the ways that we were testing the safety features of these vehicles was to have dummy animals and dummy people going out on a radio controlled roller skate. And they would dart out in front of the vehicle, and we wanted to make sure the vehicle would see them and stop in plenty of time. Yes, there's the picture. Perfect. Love it.
We're going to have to post this to social media.
No, it's great.
Visual format of podcasting. We photo just for the guest.
I love it. That's a great picture. And we also had like a little husky dog on that kind of sled as well, and it would chase the vehicle around. The dog went to a farm upstate where he can live out a better life. But yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. Those were some of the ways that we were testing the safety of the vehicle. We also, before we started the testing, after the vehicles were first delivered and commissioned, we had an open house for first responders in the area that was organized by our New Jersey Transit Police Department with Monmouth County, with Marlborough, and others, so that all of the first responders in the area would know what we were doing, but also know themselves how to interact with a vehicle like this, because it is sort of outside of their domain, if you will. A lot of first responders are now being trained on how to work with electric vehicles, so how to de-energize it or what to do if there's a fire in the battery system. This one has all those features, but it also then has the self-driving feature. So how to stop the vehicle because there isn't a driver inside. I mean, I'll tell you more about that in a second. How to stop the vehicle, how to park it and keep it from leaving a scene, how to open the doors, and then what to do if there's an emergency, right? If they needed to break a window, how would they do it? It was really instructive. It was really almost like any other motor vehicle, to be honest. It was, if there's an electrical fire and it's safe, people are away from it, let it burn. Don't worry about it. We can always get another one. Just do what you would normally do. There's nothing special that needs to be done to put out the fire, as with any other electrical powered vehicle. But the other two was, if you got to rip the doors off or smash the windows, go for it. Life safety is the most important thing. And so I think they appreciated that they could do what they needed to do, right? Because their job is to preserve life. They could do what they needed to do, and they would not put themselves or the customers at further risk if they needed to pry a door open, smash a window, things like that. Human safety comes first. And I guess I'll cap that off by saying we're very pleased and proud of our track record, that there were no personal injuries, there were no vehicle property damage, and no environmental spills or issues in the course of our testing at the airport. We're very pleased with our safety record and very proud of the staff that they took property and personal safety seriously, as they should. They're real professionals, and we appreciate them.
What do you think, Arlene?
I was skeptical, and now I'm looking for my first autonomous vehicle so I can ride in it, because I thought it was really cool. I loved all the gadgets. And just for those who are listening, there was Xbox game controller used as the steering wheel, and I took a bunch of pictures. We'll have to upload all of those back to our social media. It's buried somewhere in our KMM social media pages, but I'll re-upload it so that everyone can see. But it was so much fun. And I'm happy and excited that we are living in the technological era that we are living in right now, because the future of transportation is just really exciting. It can be also scary, but I choose to think of it as more of an exciting time to be in transportation.
Yeah, agreed. Well, thank you, Jack.
Yeah, I appreciate your interest. This was really wonderful, the way it all came together. You know, our senior management was very supportive. They really wanted to know as well, what are some technological advantages that New Jersey Transit and its partners could take advantage of going forward. We're here to help people get around and get around safely and efficiently. It's good that we had the opportunity to look at what these vehicles could mean to our community partners, and really looking to the future to see if the technological proficiency of these vehicles continues to increase. We might see more of them, and maybe in Middlesex County soon.
Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Before we leave, are there any last thoughts you would like to share with our listeners, or promote any projects at New Jersey Transit that are coming up?
Oh my goodness. There's really a lot on the horizon, I think. We're working very diligently to improve services every day in all of our modes, bus, rail, light rail. There's been a lot of innovation also in our Access Link paratransit system. We're also excited to see some of the technological opportunities that our community partners are taking advantage of. One of our local programs has been making available EV buses, I should really say EV minibuses and vans, to some of the towns, counties, and nonprofits, and they've been availing themselves of them. We're very excited that we're able to help our partners leverage these new technologies. But thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
It always is, Jack.
Yeah.
It always is. Yeah. Thank you for being at the forefront of technology in New Jersey. A lot of people don't realize champions like yourself are so important to organizations like ours that are looking for these solutions to first and last miles for our constituents. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.
So thank you all for listening to Mobility Matters podcast. You can find us on all your favorite podcast websites, including Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. For more information, you can visit us at www.kmm.org. Thank you all.
This ad is disseminated under the sponsorship of NJTPA and FHWA in the interest of information exchange.